In order to know anything empirically, we have to accept some things on a non-empirical basis. That is to say, in order to know anything from experience, we have to know some things that we do not know from experience. There are certain beliefs that are necessary if we're going to learn anything about the world from experience, but which are not themselves justified by experience. Let's call any such belief an X-belief. A number of big philosophers have looked into X-beliefs, and here's what 3 of them said. 4, actually. David Hume thinks a belief can only be known if it is either known from experience or is a relation of ideas. A relation of ideas is a tautology like 2 and 2 make 4. Everything we know about the world outside the mind is known from experience. Relations of ideas are not about the world outside the mind. They just describe how our ideas work. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a tautology because the idea of 2 and 2 and the idea of 4 are connected in our minds. It doesn't tell us anything about the world outside the mind. To know anything about the world from experience, at least beyond my knowledge of what I am perceiving right now, I must presume something that is not known from experience and is not a tautology, not a relation of ideas, an X-belief. Hume considers 3 possible beliefs that fit this criterion, 3 possible beliefs that are not known from experience but are necessary to know anything about the world from experience. First is cause and effect. Hume says you have to presume that cause and effect are real, or else you can't ever know anything in science. You can't know that gravity causes things to fall towards the center of the earth unless you know that cause happens, that gravity is able to cause because some things do cause other things. Second, there is induction. This is the principle that we can learn about things we have not experienced from what we have experienced. You can't posit that gravity causes things to fall without induction because we haven't experienced all falling objects. But the gravity thesis entails that all falling objects fall towards the center of the earth. Without experiencing them all, we have to induce, we have to reason from what we have experienced to a conclusion, a universal conclusion about what we have not experienced. And then there is the uniformity of nature. This is the principle that things in nature always act according to the same laws of physics, or things always happen the same way. How can science posit any generalized laws without presuming that the whole of nature acts the same way? So these beliefs are necessary to know anything empirically. Can they be known empirically? Remember, Hume is considering them as possible X-beliefs, not necessarily as X-beliefs. And if I understand him rightly, what he discovers is this. Causality is not an X-belief. It can be known from experience if you presume that induction works, and if you have enough experience to induct from. Induction, however, has to be an X-belief or else uniformity of nature. You can justify induction by the uniformity of nature. If things always happen the same way, then the way they've happened in my experience will resemble the way they happen in future experience, and so induction works if uniformity of nature is in place. Or vice versa. If induction works, then you can presume, you can conclude something universal about how things always happen based on your limited experiences of how they have happened. And then you can reason from that to the conclusion that there's a reason they always happen in the same ways, and it's the uniformity of nature. So induction might be justified by the uniformity of nature, or vice versa. However, one of them is unjustified. So one of them has to be an X-belief. We're left with one from Hume's analysis, not causality, but one of the other 2. All of our knowledge by experience then has at its foundation a belief that, according to Hume's understanding of knowledge, is unknowable. And that means we can't really have any real knowledge about the world outside the mind. Thus says Hume anyway. But we must accept all 3 of these beliefs. We just have to understand that we believe them not on the basis of reasoning, but we believe them by instinct or habit or custom. They're true, we presume. We must believe them, but we do not know them. Now let's move to Kant. Immanuel Kant. Notice that Hume is right about the existence and the importance of these X-beliefs. Kant considers several X-beliefs, including the belief that we exist in 3-dimensional space, the belief that we exist in time, the belief that there is such a thing as causality, and the belief in substances existing independently of the mind. Kant does some very good work in philosophical psychology, or in philosophy of perception, and he finds that these beliefs do not come from sensory experience. Rather, the mind applies them to sensory experience in order to make sense of sensory experience. So what you're looking at here in this video is a 2-dimensional image. What you're looking at is completely flat. Your computer screen is flat, or your cell phone screen is flat, but your mind knows how to apply the idea of 3 dimensions to it. You can tell that the blue bulletin board is behind me and I am in the foreground. Your mind is applying the idea of 3-dimensional space to this flat 2-dimensional screen that you're looking at. And everything you see, everything you really see with your eyes, unaided by the mind, is like this, just an arrangement of colors, which the eyes by themselves cannot tell you are layered over the surfaces of 3-dimensional objects. But your mind interprets those colors in 3-dimensional terms. Depth perception is not the gift of the eyes to the mind. The mind brings the idea of depth to our experiences in order to make sense of what we see. Now, Kant has the same standards for knowledge of the world outside the mind as Hume does. It has to come from experience. So, an X-belief about the world outside the mind is, strictly speaking, unknowable. But Kant cleverly says that X-beliefs are not about the world itself, but they're about the world as we perceive it. And also, he says, they are a priori beliefs, that is, beliefs not derived from experience. And Kant says all a priori beliefs can be known. So, if you're following all this, you might have some questions, and you might think I just said some very strange and confusing things. Let's try to clear this up in a way that philosophers have been using for a rather long time. Let's put this in the form of a dialogue between Kant and a critic. The critic says, "Wait a minute, Kant. What about the requirements for knowledge of the world outside the mind? You said that knowledge has to come from experience, and now you're saying it doesn't." Kant replies, "Well, those requirements are still in place. The X-beliefs we know are about the world inside the mind." Critic replies, "But wait, that makes you a skeptic, Kant. You think there's no world outside the mind." Kant replies, "No, obviously, the world outside the mind exists. We just can't know it directly." Critic says, "But wait, that still makes you a skeptic. You don't think we can know anything about the world." Kant replies, "Well, we know all about the world inside the mind." Critic, "But wait, you still think we can't know about the world outside the mind. That makes you a skeptic." Kant, "Thinking we can know about the world outside the mind is what leads to skepticism. Also, I can prove that we have to believe that these X-beliefs pertain to the world outside the mind. X-beliefs shape our perceptions. We cannot perceive without them." And then Kant goes on to prove just that. And he does this very well, as we discussed with reference to 3-dimensional space. He makes a pretty strong case, as far as I can tell, that these X-beliefs are part of our perception. We cannot perceive without them. They shape the way we see the world. A perception of the world, going back to that example, in 3 dimensions, depends on the belief that we exist in 3-dimensional space. An X-belief, a belief necessary to know the world through experience, but not derived from experience. And Kant makes a similar analysis for these other X-beliefs. Now, all of this is nice to understand as much as possible, but there is an alternative. Thomas Reid, representing the common sense tradition in philosophy, recognizes a number of X-beliefs. Here are a few. The existence of the world outside the mind. The fact that the past is not a fiction. The existence of other minds. The fact that testimony is a source of knowledge. The reliability of the senses. The reliability of reason. The uniformity of nature. The reliability of memory as a source of knowledge of the past, and some others. Reid realizes that Hume is right about the importance of X-beliefs, but Reid says we can know them. Hume said we believe them by a right and a useful instinct. Reid agrees, but he also thinks that instinct is a source of knowledge. Now, one thing about Reid that's nice is that last thing from Kant, that Kant shows that X-beliefs are prerequisites for perception. All of this can be easily integrated into the Reidian account of knowledge. And the big thing to remember about the difference between Kant and Hume on the one hand and Reid on the other is that on Reid's account we can say that we know the X-beliefs. So let's review the ideas that are compatible. All 3 of these, Hume, Kant, and Reid, say there are X-beliefs, beliefs that are necessary to know about the world from experience, but which themselves are not derived from experience. Hume says, actually, we can't know them, and so we can't know anything about the world outside the mind, but we must believe them. Reid and Kant say those beliefs are there, and we must believe them. Hume says we must believe them, and it's a proper belief, and it's believed by instinct. Reid agrees. Kant says they are necessary for us to perceive. They are like the sunglasses we cannot take off, glued to our faces. They're part of our apparatus for knowing reality. And Reid can agree with that as well. But Reid also says they are knowledge. But how do we know them? If we believe them by instinct, how can we know them? How can an instinct to believe be a source of knowledge? That's a good question. Hume doesn't seem to have been aware of the possibility of an answer, but Reid seemed to think the answer was we can know by instinct. An instinct can be a source of knowledge. As to how it works, well, Reid didn't explain in sufficient detail, but along comes Alvin Plantinga a few hundred years later to finish the job. Plantinga explains how these instincts are sufficient for giving X beliefs a degree of warrant. When I know an X belief, my belief in it is produced, says Plantinga, by cognitive faculties, which are those aforementioned instincts. These faculties are aimed at the production of true beliefs. They're reliable, and they're functioning properly, and they're functioning in the right environment. Or at least, to be a little more precise, if my faculties for knowing are functioning properly in the right environment, reliable and aimed at true belief, and if all of these things are in place and they're giving me a belief in one of these X beliefs, well, then that belief is warranted. And of course, a belief that is warranted is a belief that can be known. And so here are the three main options we've looked at. There's what we could call hard empiricism, inspired by David Hume. Knowledge of the world outside the mind comes from experience and experience alone. Since there are X beliefs, there is no such thing as knowledge of the world outside the mind. Kantian soft empiricism. Knowledge of the world outside the mind comes from experience alone. Since there are X beliefs, there is no real knowledge of the world outside the mind, but we can have knowledge from experience. We just have to understand it's knowledge of the world inside the mind. Knowledge not of the world itself, but knowledge of the world as we experience it, which is largely a mental phenomenon. And then there's common sense soft empiricism from Thomas Reid. Knowledge of the world outside the mind is possible. It does depend on X beliefs. Our trust in X beliefs comes from instincts that are sufficient to give our beliefs a degree of warrant, because they're instincts to believe what is true. They're instincts aimed at true belief, aimed at producing true belief in our minds. And they're reliable, and those instincts are functioning properly in the right environment. And that's how we can know X beliefs, and we can gain knowledge from experience as a result. So, why, you might wonder, does all this matter? Here's why. It's easy, indeed it's downright fashionable, to say that all genuine knowledge comes from experience. But, in fact, in order to know anything about the world outside the mind from experience, beyond my knowledge of what I'm perceiving right now, and maybe even including that, we must presume at least these beliefs that do not come from experience, but make it possible to learn from experience. That the world outside the mind exists, that it is three-dimensional, that it exists in time, that the past is not a fiction, that our five senses have access to that world. And we might also add, for the academic discipline of science to give us any knowledge, we also have to presume some other things. That there are minds, other conscious beings in the universe, that their testimony, i.e. the testimony of a scientist, is a source of knowledge. And then we also have to assume either that there is a uniformity of nature, or else that reason is reliable. Inductive reason, if we follow Humean philosophy of science, or deductive reason if we follow Karl Popper, who emphasized deduction in science. So, this matters, these X beliefs matter, because not all knowledge derives from experience, and experience alone. And if it does, then there's hardly any knowledge at all.